Hello and welcome to the webinar, Will Your Project Endure Distributed or Remote QA Teams? Hosted by QATestLab. Thanks for joining us today. QATestLab continues a series of live webinars dedicated to QA and testing, where we're talking about specifics of software testing, QA team management, test approaches, and tools. We are analyzing tricky cases on real projects. Besides, we will tell at what stage of software development testing should be implemented and how to select a proper provider of QA services to build long-term business relations. We will try to prepare the most helpful and interesting topics for you to understand nuances of software testing and avoid any pitfalls. If you have any suggestions about the webinar topic, please write to marketing@QATestLab.com. Today, I will be your speaker. My name is Angelina Friz, and I am a program manager in QATestLab. Every software company faces situations when it is necessary to add QA specialists to the projects. The variety of required specialists depends on the specifics of the company and projects. It can be one person or even a team. And at this moment, the decision is about a choice we will do. At some point, we are going to have to decide for ourselves, will we involve an in-house member of the team or remote worker or distributed team? I'm sure you may hear some common stereotypes. For example, that remote QA teams deliver poor quality or communication challenges are too large. Despite the myth, Tom Preston Werner, CEO of popular code-sharing site GitHub, often says that if you do not have a distributed team, you are by definition not working with the most talented people. Let's look at these definitions in details. Distributed, remote, telecommute, these terms frequently used by work flexibility advocates might sound similar, but truly they are quite different. The similarities between distributed and remote staffers are quite incredible. Both work alone, away from the office, somewhere independently away from their coworkers and team members. The differences begin when taking into account the integration of teams, office locations, and the way teams are connected. So what do remote teams look like? Remote teams, like distributed teams, work away from each other, but usually that doesn't mean that everyone works remotely, or that the company distributes its team members around the world. When working on a remote team, rather than trying to connect across multiple time zones, you might only work with one or two other remote workers, while the rest of your team is centrally located. Remote teams can also be location-based. Sure, everyone works from home, but they work within a specific distance to an office where they occasionally meet. The term remote in remote teams means that certain team members work remotely away from the office or other members on the team. Here we are to clarify what do distributed teams look like. Distributed teams identify the word distributed literally. Yes, team members and coworkers are all distributed away from each other. This could mean working at home from anywhere in the world, or it could mean that you are working in an office in a location where no other team members are located. With distributed teams, team members rarely see each other, and each work in a location where no other team members are located. Although distributed teams are often used to define flexible work, it doesn't necessarily mean that those on the team are getting to experience any work flexibility perks. Some distributed teams are bound to an office building, not a home-based office. So what is the best way for your project? Are you trying to decide whether to form a remote or distributed QA team? Consider your company needs, the nature of the work to be done, and the likelihood of finding qualified team members in your immediate area. Many people decide to go with a remote team when they're having trouble finding experienced, qualified talent in their area and want to expand their research space. Some teams already work together in a physical location, then decide to bring a remote worker across the country, in other words, forming a distributed team. Remote can be equated with away from the office, and distributed can be equated with scattered around. While remote teams can occasionally meet up and work together in a physical location, they are considered a remote team because they usually do not gather in centralized location. Let's walk through some strategies to help bridge the distance gap between local and remote QA teams, and ideas to help mitigate other potential issues as well. We are going to break down the myth and find out what solutions are the best for your company. The first challenge you may hear is poor communication. The biggest challenge is working in remote teams isn't dealing with the physical distribution of your teammates, but reducing the psychological distance between everyone. The lack of face-to-face interaction can cause the feeling of isolation and even some kind of paranoia. If you have no clear lines of communication, some people might be working on tasks that don't really matter to the short-term goals. You could even have teammates solving exactly the same issues. This used to happen a lot in the early days of IT industry foundation, but not today. The only way you can get around the difficulties is by using the right tools to manage workflow. And I want you to walk through the solutions with me for this challenge. So video conferencing does a lot to bridge the gap between teams, especially for those distributed and remote teams. Most people still think of video conferencing as scheduled time. Creating a culture of using video chat for spontaneous casual conversation takes time, but it's worth it. Teams need to select tooling that not only provides a technical function, but also one that they will actively use as additional communications channels. For example, Slack, Skype, etc. Stop emailing your coworkers. Use it only for formal procedures or reports. Email is not the best way to communicate with your team on a routine basis. The chat is far more efficient way to communicate. Use emoji. These more emotive forms of communication help convey tone and emotion you don't get from just text. Make meetings matter. Each meeting should be cost-effective and have purpose. Otherwise, your team is wasting a rare opportunity. Encourage non-work communication. You need to leave some room for fun in your team communications. Team building is about more than just business communication. When you're remote, it can be hard to get to know your coworkers personally because those personal conversations just don't happen as naturally as they do in an office setting. Start an off-topic conversation channel and let people share some of who they are, not just what they do for your company. To sum up, I would like to agree with the quote of Paul G. Mayer, who said that communication is the human connection and the key to personal and career success. Another issue with remote teams is the lack of coordination and collaboration among team members. This is obvious because they are sitting thousands of miles away from one another. It may cause the lack of knowledge sharing between on-site and remote locations among internal team members. Well, there's a silver lining here. Let's look how to handle this process. I would like to start with the quote of Matti Stepanek, which describes the collaboration in the team. Unity is strength. When there is a teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. The best practice from experience of QATestLab is setting up such procedures. Clear roles, tasks, and accountability. We clearly define the definition of done. All tasks are described in a comprehensive way. We have guidelines for filling effective bugs reports, so all bugs are reported unambiguously. Shared responsibility for team success. We do not use them, we use us. Healthy conflict resolution. First of all, we solve the problem caused by the conflict. We maximize information sharing by all available ways. In addition to the internal wiki and Google Docs, we also use records of internal educational videos and text lectures for sharing knowledge base. The next one challenge I'm going to break down is time difference. My favorite one, because I consider it more likely as an opportunity, not a challenge. You may think that it's hard to handle, that it may limit your information exchange and diversity in the remote team, that it may lead to poor communication and so on and so forth. Of course, I keep several tips for you. Maximize the golden hours. Every photographer knows the golden hours just before and after sunrise and sunset is one of the most effective times to take great landscape photos. The golden hours for distributed software teams are when the local and remote teams are both in their respective offices at the same time. When all teams are in the office, this is a great time for stand-ups. Rotate the meeting time so it's a shared burden rather than continually subjecting the remote team to the odd hours. Provide each member of team with emergency contacts and after-hours contacts. Closely monitor the entire team's engagement at stand-up. If there is undue strain or the team is not getting a lot out of it, team members will begin to disengage and stop listening or sharing. And stand-up doesn't absolutely have to be a daily meeting. Meet with the remote team a few times a week and use the other days for a local stand-up. Similarly, stand-up doesn't have to be a morning routine either. Whatever time of day is most convenient for everyone involved is the best time of day. I will show you a time difference from which both sides benefit. Let's imagine that while developers are sleeping, the remote QA team are in the process of testing and then vice versa stage. The last challenge we will cover today is project structure. One of the biggest challenges for remote team managers is ensure that their remote team members embrace the company culture. As remote workers usually do not abide for the company rules and policies, keeping strict check on remote employee activities and behavior is important to achieve success with remote teams. You could even consider paying your remote workers a visit once in every few months. Face-to-face interaction with remote workers can go a long way in getting them aligned to company culture. Whether are you managing a remote team or in-house one, you will have to build stronger relationships with your team members and nurture them. Building a long-term relationship is even more difficult in a remote team setup because you communicate with your team members less frequently. Be open and accessible so that your remote team members can share their problems with you. Find solutions to their problems and help them to perform well. When your team members trust you, they will not only give it their best shot, but never hide anything from you. In order for your project to run like clockwork, there needs to be a clear hierarchy in place in order for key tasks and responsibilities to be delegated correctly. We strongly recommend to use one team approach and build relationships with every member of the team, especially a remote one. One of the important keys to success in managing distributed teams is to have a high commitment level from all team members. And the best way to get that is to give them ownership over their work. And the additional approach of collaboration in projects is remote outsourcing. Using QA outsourcing only is a technique to cut costs in the past. When business decides to outsource, it's usually for any of all of the following reasons: to lower costs, to redirect energy, or to efficiently make use of technology, labor, and resources. If your QA lead works remotely, he understands better all pitfalls that the remote team can face. So what do we consider the biggest benefits of remote or distributed teams? It's the ability to hire the best talent with no geographical boundaries. You can embrace time zones and discover the magic of the time difference. The cost of running a virtual team are minimal in comparison. To summarize, I would like to share with you short tips of successful collaboration with distributed or remote teams. Tip number 1, build trust and relationship. Tip number 2, build a communication plan, gather feedback. Tip number 3, share responsibilities. Tip number 4, strong team leadership. Tip number 5, develop processes task. Tip number 6, put an escalation structure in place. I hope you will find this information useful. Thank you for staying with us. We still have a couple of minutes to answer questions. So the first question was, you manage a number of teams. Are there remote or distributed ones among them? So thank you for your questions. Actually, I'm happy to collaborate both with remote and distributed teams. And I don't feel big differences in processes when everything is organized and managed. So the next question is, What kind of team would you personally prefer? I think that working with remote or distributed teams is a great opportunity for boosting your project development process. As I mentioned before, as for me, it's quite a similar process of cooperation. But remote workers who work alone, sometimes I think they need more attention because they can be more isolated. So be careful with the people who are just working like a single one worker that is remote from you. How could you be sure your remote team is working with a good quality? Nice question. So first of all, I advise you to rethink all tips and recommendations that I gave you in this webinar and try to implement it in your team. I'm sure that quality should be measured. So set your main goals and help your team to achieve it. The last one question is about what motivation in such teams and how could you see your testers are happy or not happy? It's quite not easy question because we are all different people and our emotions may be really hide from other people, but don't underestimate the power of communication and rules of remote communication. Keep your team on the same page of all processes and try to make really measured and valued meetings. So if you have any questions left, please contact us using the contact details on the slide, and we will answer them soon. Thank you all again, and have a wonderful day or evening. Bye.